What's up, guys? So we're back out in the shop working on the Firebird. This is my little makeshift paint booth I've been using for all the small parts. So that's a fan I installed in the back of my shop, and this is just a Harbor Freight shed. It's a smaller one. I think it's I don't know, 12 by 12. So for these smaller parts, I'm hoping I can just sand them by hand with some 180 grit sandpaper. That's 80 and 180. I don't know how tough this paint is going to be to come off. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of work. I would like to get this lacquer paint off though, at least get through the blue color. These are metal, so if they're too tough, which most of the paint's already missing, but if they're too tough I can sandblast them. I'm gonna try to stick with 180. If it's too tough I'll go down to 80, but if I can go with 180 that'll be less likely to have scratches in the end after I primer it. So I'll be able to get it smooth with the primer. Some mirrors. I think that's already through in a few places. Yeah, so that's coming off pretty easy. So that won't be too bad. These I might hit with the DA. These tail light covers, probably need to get the tail lights out. It looks like they were painted with them in there. I don't know if this is factory paint. I assume it is. It's I know the car had been wrecked, so maybe this was part of the repainting, but there's actually paint on the plastic there, so I need to figure out how to get those apart. So I guess I'm gonna start sanding. You can see I actually stripped these. So that'll be real easy to get off. Just looks like one of them got missed. So another one, two of them got missed. So two of them should be pretty easy. I do have a little bit of stripper left, but not much. So I got a piece of a stirring stick I'm going to stick in here, just so I can apply a little more even pressure. On parts like this, it doesn't really matter, you can just use your finger to press down on it. But if you have any flat spots, you may end up with grooves where your fingers are, so it's best to use some kind of a block where you can. I think a full-size block would be aggressive on this. You can put some tape over that when I start sanding around here. You can see this paint gums up the sandpaper real bad. You can get some of it off, but you go through sandpaper pretty quick when it's gummy like that. This is that lacquer paint, and it seems to be pretty gummy, at least on this car. I don't know if lacquer paint's always like that. So when you're sanding, this is especially true for doing body work, sanding filler, but if you're using a block on a curved surface, and I'm sure there's other techniques, this is just the one that I use, you don't necessarily just want to sand straight, because you're just touching like one little place on the curve, and you'll end up sanding through in one spot. The whole goal here is to try to sand it down as smoothly as as evenly as possible, so you end up with a nice smooth finish. So a way to do it is to use like an X pattern. So for instance, we have a curve right here. So I don't sand like that. And I don't sand like that because it's a compound curve, and both ways will create flat spots. Do kind of a cross pattern like that. Move forward and back, and then come up here and go the other way. And that'll give you a much more even sanding. It's real good for filler because filler's really soft. and that way it'll guarantee you're taking off an even layer. So you just, whenever you put filler on a car, you try to get it, you know, pretty close to your final shape as well as you can, and then use that X pattern, you know, across the curves. And if you sand evenly all the way across it, you'll find it'll turn into a pretty smooth finish. And then of course, as you get closer to the end, you have to find the hot spots and work on them a little more, but still use that X pattern. Just give a little more force or go over it a little more where the hot spots are. Also, when you're doing a lot of sanding, it's probably good to put some kind of a mask on. I got a respirator I use when I paint. It's probably not necessary for this, but as you start to sand, the dust gets in the air and you can start to taste it. You know, you get like a little bit of dryness in your mouth. You know, it's probably not good breathing and consuming that dust. So it's good to use at least one of these little surgical masks or something. If you were working on a newer car, you wouldn't necessarily have to take all the paint off. But this is really old paint, and it's lacquer paint, which is a single stage paint, whereas modern paints will be a well, that's not the right way to say it. It's a 1K paint, whereas modern paints will be a 2K paint. They'll have a hardener of some sort plus the paint that you mix together. It's a lot stronger paint than this early lacquer paint, which is just a one part. You just open the can and spray it. So it's best to get this off if you can. I didn't take it all the way down on the door jambs and some places under the hood just because it's not as critical there. If the paint lasts, instead of have the sun beating on it and stuff like that, it kind of leads to degradation. But you know, especially for the parts you're going to see, you want to get this stuff off if you can, because this is just make it more likely for this to bubble up. You know, this will be the weakest link in the bond between your final paint and your part. So if you can get this stuff off, you'll much more likely that your final paint's going to last longer. To the point here where I'm sanding, I'm not really going to be able to get down in there. So it looks like if I take these two screws out right here, I'll be able to slide this mount back. I won't be able to get it off because of that, and I'm not going to take that apart. But at least I'll be able to get it away so I can sand real good around everything. I got a lot of dirt in here. I'm going to clean all that out because you don't want to sand over dirt, because then the dirt will become your grit for your sandpaper, and of course that's probably going to be a lot heavier than that. You'll end up with some gouges. Just using a little bit of lacquer thinner. It'll certainly take some of the paint off since it's lacquer paint, but don't care about that because we're taking it off anyway. You can almost just wipe the paint off. I got this one mostly sanded except for the base. Getting kind of tired of sanding by hand, so I'm going to switch over to these side pieces of the spoiler. Use the DA. The tail lights I'm going to have to sand by hand. I don't think there's a way around that. But all these parts down here, I think I can put in the sandblaster. So that'll help with that. And of course the bumpers I'll mostly be able to do with the DA. You can see how the lacquer paint cracked. It's like it shrunk, made like a desert pattern. So even if you wanted to paint over the lacquer paint, you wouldn't be able to. In this case, you have to get that stuff sanded down. And yeah, it's fiberglass. It feels almost like metal. For sure it's fiberglass. So you can see the DA only clogs up around the edges, which means it goes through pads a little quicker, because you can save them and use the center part for the hand sanding stuff. So I've been sanding around here. You can see the white stuff is the gel coat for the fiberglass. So I'm going to try to sand down to the gel coat, maybe leave a little bit of this primer on here, but not go through the gel coat. I'll try to do that on all of them. This is my jukebox I showed in the last video. I bought this off of Facebook Marketplace. A guy pretty close to here just moved down here from somewhere up north, and said his wife said he had to get rid of his toys. So when I bought this, I asked the guy if it worked. He said it works, but you have to play with it. He said every time he cuts something, he just tinkers around with it, eventually it works. So I got it back, and sure enough, played around with it and it started working. So I had to lubricate some things, and there's a relay that doesn't work sometimes. If you give it a little help, it gets going. So it's in pretty good shape. I replaced the bulbs to get all the lights working, and had to replace, I'm not sure what it's called, but that spinny thing up there has a fluorescent bulb in it, and it's a thing that you would use in the place of a ballast. So they sold them at Lowe's, so I guess they're pretty common. And I think it just was a timed relay kind of thing, so it would energize the little filaments to heat up the fluorescent tube, and then it would switch over. So anyway, it was pretty dirty when I got it. I cleaned it up. If you look at the, see if I can zoom in, chrome's chipping off on the trim around the edges. But that's really all that's really wrong with it. The little grills, chrome grills, not showing up very good. It's too dark in here. They're a little rusty, but it's a good shop jukebox. So it hasn't been recapped or anything. The guy just, I guess, cut it on often enough where it never had an issue. But stereo does kind of come in and out. So I think probably need to pull the amplifier out and recap it and check the tubes and everything, clean everything up. I did replace one of the tubes when I got it. One of the speakers wasn't working, and I replaced the tubes with some other tubes that came with it. So anyway, when I got this, it actually came with a second one, and he said it was a parts one for this one, and it's taken apart. And then I had a whole bunch of parts that came with it, and looking through it, I've got every part for that one. So I think maybe be cool to restore one of them, maybe make it nice and put it inside the house, or maybe in the other shop. I got two shops, two jukeboxes. So I'd like to put a Bluetooth module in it so I can play music from my phone in here, and just recap it so it'll be reliable. I've placed a lot of the wiring in this one. This one's in pretty good shape, this one that runs. It's pretty good. I replaced the needle on it. It's just there's a relay in there that's doesn't work quite right, and it's a special relay. I don't really want to replace it with something new, but maybe I'll pull it out one day and see if we can do something to it. But anyway, that's my jukeboxes. So here's my sandblaster setup. See, it's a little janky. I've just got an old vacuum cleaner duct taped into the vacuum port on the side. I'd like to, put a cyclone filter on the side and 3D print some brackets so it fits properly. Instead of using the duct tape, it leaks a lot, but works okay. And I also have, if we get over here, a light in there. So if I plug that in, this is just a Harbor Freight. So get some of those parts and stick them in there and sandblast. This gets really loud, so I'll cut the sound down. So all those little beads right there will clog up the gun pretty quick. I've covered the car with some plastic just to keep some of this dust from getting into the car, but the vacuum cleaner does a pretty good job of keeping it out. Look how nice this turned out. And that's ready to primer and paint. And I sure do love the sandblaster. It's not the fastest thing, but it gives such a nice finish. It's kind of fun to do too. Alright, well that's a week of work. So we got these things sandblasted. Got a corner piece, side piece of the spoiler about halfway done. This one maybe a quarter of the way done. Haven't got the taillights done yet. I got the one side mirror mostly done except for the base. I might sandblast that because I can get it away from the mirror. And just need to finish sanding this one. I got half of it done. So I'd probably take that off and sandblast it, but I'll sand that down because I don't want to risk messing that mirror up. So I was hoping to get a little farther done. I wanted to have all this stuff sanded and go ahead and, you know, primer it, paint it. But hopefully next week get this stuff painted and maybe get on those bumpers and the actual spoiler. So I've kind of jumped into this series at the end, but if you're interested in any of the work that I did up to this, if you go to facebook.com/JohnHamerProjects, be in the description below or at the end credit, and on there I've taken pictures throughout this entire project. In fact, the majority of pictures on that Facebook page are from this project, so it's pretty much devoted to this project. So go check that out if you want to see more on this. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys.